Hey everyone, welcome to the Drive Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Attia. So good to sit down with you, brother.
You too. Thanks for having me.
So much to talk about, but I feel like I just want to start with kind of getting a sense of the first time you heard about this. Was it a call from Darren? Like, how did you even get involved in this project?
Yeah, I had a call from Darren. It'd be going back on 3 years now. And he said, I want to do this series, a docuseries called Limitless on longevity. And he said, I know you're a fit, healthy guy, but we want to dive into the science and put you in some pretty extreme, intense physical, emotional situations and see how you fare. And you can be the guinea pig as far as the longevity science goes. And I said, why not? And initially it was supposed to be about a 3-week shoot. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot. Once COVID hit, the show got spread out over 2.5 years. And really, it transformed in the best way possible. I think due to having a hell of a lot more time than I think we'd first anticipated, we were able to flesh out each episode, explore the science in greater detail. I was able to grow throughout the experience and have different opinions on myself, different opinions on how I approached health and wellness. So, yeah, I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I think it was a lot due to the time span we're able to shoot it on.
So kind of going back to this, first of all, I can't believe they bait and switched you on 3 weeks of shooting because even before COVID, I was involved in 4 weeks of shooting.
Yeah.
So I don't know where anybody thought
Initially it was 2 and I was like, I can't fit that in my schedule. Then it was 3 and then 2.5 years. So,
and we joke about it, right? What do we call it? Relentless. We're going to do a title change.
Limited, I was going to call it.
So where were you had you were done Avengers by that point?
Yeah, what did I'd done Avengers. I think I was doing the press tour about the time this came up, and hadn't done Love and Thunder.
So I remember 3 years ago, almost to the day, I was sitting in my apartment here in New York with Darren, Ruth, Ari, every sort of like the core group from Newtopia and from Protozoa. And at that point, so call it November of 2019, they had the idea for 6 episodes. It was still a bit foggy. And it's kind of amazing how quickly they morphed that into that first shoot when we started in January. Was there anything about it that you had apprehension about doing? I mean, besides the time, obviously time is an issue based on your schedule, but were you nervous, worried, anxious about doing this? Because this is not acting.
Yeah, I was, to be honest. So I had never hosted anything before, and it's one thing to, hide behind a character and behind the mask of whatever individual you're playing in a film setting, but then to be yourself. I've done obviously plenty of interviews and so on, but to be in a situation like this where it was not only looking into the science, but dissecting kind of my abilities and seeing what my limits were in one regard. And there was a vulnerability that's required there. There had to be authentic, so I didn't want to hold back. But it's it was a little more of a hesitation, or a lot more sort of thinking about it as how I was going to come across, and was it going to be genuine, was it going to be appreciated or not, or all sorts of silly kind of doubts and questions start to creep in that I wasn't normally sort of thinking about. And then the thing transformed anyway. As far as my initial, was there any hesitation around taking on the show? I don't think any of us knew what it was going to be. The 3 or 4 weeks that we talk about, even when you were involved, and I spoke to Darren the last couple of days about this, he said, yeah, it was a very different beast at the beginning, and due to the time, but also I think due to what I was willing to do and the commitment I had for it, it was allowed to evolve and become something bigger. And as did the challenges. There were discussions about cold water immersion, and we're going to do ice baths and so on. And then it was like, well, let's go to Norway and let's, swim in the Arctic Ocean. And sort of it became more and more epic as it went on.
It feels like you, and I don't want to project this, but so correct me if I'm wrong, but as I watched you, because one of the things about this that was kind of a joy is how close we became as a group. Like you, your team, me, Darren, like the whole group
Yeah.
kind of coalesced. It's like you seem to trust the team even more and more as time went on, and gave more and more of yourself. Because again, everybody sort of got involved in this with the expectation this was going to be, bracketed in terms of
Yeah.
time, and COVID in part, but also I just think the breadth of expectation of what this could be expanded the scope so much. Do you get the sense that you were willing to give way more of yourself as this thing went on than maybe you
Yeah.
had committed to up front?
Absolutely. And I think due to what you're saying about there's a trust there with the people I was working with. I knew on paper that these were the experts in their field and all of you were going to take care of me and advise me in the right way. But it's like you're working with a director, and each of the experts in each of these series were kind of leading the way, and they were at the helm, and I was following. And if I have a good relationship with my director and I trust them, and that only comes through um, experience and time spent, then I'm going to give more of myself and take more risks and not feel like it's going to be exploited in any way.
So the first episode that we filmed was the fasting one.
Look, I'm going to do it with you.
You are?
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to go through this with somebody else. So
Okay, good. Good. We'll suffer together.
we will.
I've definitely gone a day without food before. I think I get pretty cranky when I've missed a meal. Certainly detrimental to my happiness. It's a pretty long time. Why 4 days? Why not?
Why not longer?
I mean, what is the benefit with 4 days? Why that number?
3 to 4 days is probably that window at which we do enough to change how your body is interacting with the absence of nutrients to basically do kind of a reboot on your system.
Oh, really? Do you think I'm going to be able to hold it together? Do you reckon, in your experience, you see a lot of people, the first time they do it, succeed?
In the next 4 days, there is no doubt in my mind there will be a period of time in which you feel sluggish or
Tears.
yeah,
Emotional.
kind of grumpy, grouchy, whatever. But if you really stop to think about it, this idea that we kind of live today where we're sort of surrounded by unlimited access to food and we can eat 3 meals and snack in between them, it's a relatively recent addition to our species.
Right.
And our ancestors would have gone days without food all the time. And not only did they have to do that, they had the ability to, in a period of starvation, actually go out and hunt.
I think that shows up third or fourth in the
Yeah,
sequence.
it does, yeah.
What did you know going into that, and what was your expectation?
Just that I had never fasted before, and I knew that this was going to be
And I don't think
a
you knew how
challenge.
long it was going to be or anything like that. I mean, we sort of
No,
sprung that on you in real time over that dinner.
We did. I think the initial discussions were around like intermittent fasting and restricted sort of feeding windows. And then it was like, oh, maybe we'll do a day or a couple of days. And you're like, no, we're doing 4 days. and
By the
that
way, I
was intense.
suggested 3.
Did you?
I did, and they said no, we're going to go one more, because I said I wouldn't normally have a patient go more than 3 days.
Yeah.
On the first one, and
Good.
and they pushed it. They pushed it to 4.
It was, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as we talked about many times, my expectation or kind of thoughts around would I be able to do it or not, I think we're in line with yours. I thought, look, we're going to commit, we're going to do it. But we kept discussing, you'll kick into ketosis on day 2, and maybe day 3. And then it got to like day 4 and I'm like, nah, I'm not feeling any of the sharpness or alertness. And then right in the afternoon when we went spearfishing,
Yep.
probably at the right time too, it kicked in and things started to sort of percolate.
I remember saying to Tanya, I think it was to Tanya, it might have been somebody else, but I think it was to Tanya as we were getting ready to head out on the boat. That was the moment when I kind of realized how sort of strong you were, because I felt like you didn't have that much time to prepare for that exercise, and it wasn't under ideal circumstances. It's one thing to say you're going to do your first fast, it's going to be for 4 days, and it was hard enough. I mean, we worked out every day. We had a bunch of other things that we had to do, but then learning an entirely new skill around breath holding and spearfishing,
Hmm.
I mean, I think would be challenging under any circumstance. How much of that do you remember? You know, it's been almost 3 years since we filmed that, but how much of that do you remember? And was there ever a moment when you thought, I'm not worried that something's going to happen to me, but I'm worried that I'm not going to be successful?
Yeah, I think that was most of the episodes. As I'd get to, I was just doing the Arctic swim or doing the 4-day fast or climbing the rope, I kept thinking, if I don't complete this exercise, it's not really an episode, or it's pretty anticlimactic. And so there was definitely a healthy amount of fear there, kind of motivating me. Um, but it, I don't know. It also coming back to the why of it and why we're doing it, and understanding the specific purpose of each challenge was, on one hand looked like they were trying to kill me, but on the other hand was like there was an incredible amount of information and knowledge and support and science there that says you do this consistently, you work this into your daily routine, then the benefits are exponential.
So let's think about Norway, because we filmed that in, I think, February, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
went right from Australia, maybe had 2 weeks off, and then we're all in Norway. My recollection of that was a beauty like I couldn't imagine. So we were there to do this thing, but it was in this place that you would normally never go to. I feel like we took like 3 flights to get there or
Yeah,
something crazy.
yeah.
Again, Ross spoke about this a little bit last night, it was another example of you were being asked to do something much quicker than you would normally do so, right? I think you didn't, what was the first day you jumped in that water? Because it's different than an ice bath. Like you
Yeah.
can sit in an ice bath all you want.
Yeah.
It's totally different experience to jump in the ocean when it's 36 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, some of the episodes I was able to train for, specifically probably the strength episode. That was on and off over the course of 6-7 months, and then I had injuries and so on. But the cold water immersion, I mean, I did a couple of ice baths back in
We were doing some in Australia.
Yes, back in Australia,
Yeah.
and that was new to me.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to Ross about it, and the sort of overarching idea was that, they were talking about developing brown fat, and we're going to monitor that. And Ross is like, no, not in 4 days. This is going to happen. And so it became as much a adaptation around cold water immersion as much as it was sort of a resilience test, or just a grit, head down, go for it. Because the first time we jumped in the water in Norway, and we were in there for 4.5 minutes. I mean, that was longer than any ice bath I've had, but it was snowing. I'm breathing in, freezing cold air, and
Windy.
and it's windy, and I'm also moving. You sit in an ice bath, and there's a couple of mil of water that starts to heat up if you stay still. You're treading water, then none of that's happening. So a lot of it was trusting Ross and listening to Ross's voice, and just kind of, again, back to what you said about the trust. If I didn't have Ross there coaching me through it, having also done it, and even more extremes, I would have questioned it to no end. And in particular, on the actual swim itself, halfway through, I was like, every part of me was like, "You're dying. Get out of the water. This is ridiculous."
Yeah, explain to me and to folks watching and listening what it feels like, because I have never been in water that cold. I've done long swims at about 49 degrees.
Mhm.
And even at that temperature, which seems balmy compared to 36, I mean, that's a big difference,
Yeah.
right? It feels like you're on fire.
Oh yeah.
It actually feels like you're in boiling oil, which I think most people wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
How is that possible that you can get in something so cold and the sensation is that of being lit on fire?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I think is, I'm curious to whether you felt it as well, is the breathlessness. Like it starts to take your breath away.
Yeah. It definitely. I mean, I'm going to sound overly dramatic, but it was one of the most painful things I've ever done. And again, in comparison to the ice bath, it's very different. The big thing was putting my head underwater. Again, an ice bath.
Remind me, did you have earplugs?
I don't think I did. No.
Oof.
And the idea
big
was,
difference, by the way.
Oh yeah. But I was standing on the shore, and all the training we'd done was treading water, head above water. And Ross is like, "Let's go for a proper swim tomorrow." I was like, I just don't want to do it, mate. I'm just saving it for the day, or the afternoon when we actually shoot it. I'm just going to go for it, because if I experience, and I think in hindsight, if I had have experienced how painful it was, I would have been even more doubtful. So I was standing on the edge, and he said, "We want to warm up as much as possible before you get on and strip off and dive in. And he said, and then when you get in, just take a second to try and adjust before you put your head under. And we did the warm up. I walked down to the edge, and I didn't even know if they were rolling. But I was like, I'm out of here. I'm in the water and I'm off. And Ross didn't even have time to jump onto the boat that was chasing us along. I jumped in, just started going, and the first I don't know, maybe 25, 30, 40 meters, I was like, got this. You know what? I'm going all the way. And I'm coming back. I'm doing 2 laps. And out of nowhere, once the initial sort of adrenaline went, I felt the most extreme headache, pain right all through and to the back of my eyes, in front of my head, everywhere. And I was looking at the bottom as I was swimming, and I started getting really dizzy. And then I all of a sudden stopped, and I was like, I'm going to throw up. Like, it was that painful. And then I look, and I've actually swum off course a bit, and I've started swimming toward where a couple of the camera guys are. And they're like, the buoy's that way, go that way. So I head down again, and the whole time I'm just like, nah, get out. And then I have another voice in my head, I have Ross's voice there saying, come on, fight, dig in. And I just started going for it. But what starts to happen is your arms and legs are just like lead balloons. Nothing works. And I didn't even, I felt like I was swimming like this, a little chicken
Yeah,
arms
and you
or
can't
something.
keep your fingers together.
Can't
So
keep
your
the fingers
fingers start
together.
to splay. You can't
Yeah.
hold the water.
Yeah. And it's just like, it was gnarly. And then I got to the buoy, and they're all cheering and stuff. And, Darren said, I was waiting for a big celebration. I was like, I couldn't move. I was going to die. And then the jet ski pulls up, and he's like, well done, mate. And I'm like,
I can't get
you
out.
help me on, mate. I can't lift my arms. And they drag me up onto it. And then the same thing would have gone on the boat. Everyone's like cheering, and Ross is like, get out of the way. And he came in with a blanket and a little beanie and sort of started warming me up and so on. It was wild, but I've never felt the endorphin kick and the sort of elation that I felt afterward. It was incredible. And I just remember the most serene, peaceful state, in awe of everything. And we are there in Norway. It's the most stunning backdrop. But it's just this wonderful sense of calm and overwhelming sort of joy. And I think that it comes with any time you achieve something that you think is impossible, or overcome some great challenge, or in the face of diversity or whatever, you've overcome it. There's such a beautiful feeling. It made me think about people who climb Everest and do extreme feats all the time, and the rest of us are wondering, why the hell would you do that? I believe it's for that that moment. That post feeling was pretty special, and I'll remember it for a long time.
Well, I think there's actually something within that. It's not just the accomplishing the feat. It's the temporal juxtaposition of being so low and so high.
Right.
Like, I don't think, how we don't feel speed? Like, if you're on an airplane, you don't feel it. You feel acceleration. In other words, we're only wired, I think, to feel a rate of change.
Right.
And I think that's true of emotion. Like, if you're constantly in a state of bliss, everything is going well all the time,
norm,
I don't think you feel profound joy. So I think the reason, in part, I think there's a physiologic expectation for what you experience. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I think what you're also experiencing is 4 minutes earlier, I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And even if the upper part of your brain knew you weren't, the reptilian part of your brain absolutely believed it.
Yeah.
You were dead.
Yep.
And then 4 or 5 minutes later, you have this unbelievable surge of positive emotion. I don't think you can find a period of time in when just 4 minutes you can go from your absolute lowest to your absolute highest.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the juice.
Yeah, absolutely. And with no negative lasting injury,
Yeah,
et cetera, Yeah, for sure.
Of all the things in Limitless, right, the strength stuff, the endurance stuff, the mental challenges, all those things, the hardest one to make the case for this will make you live longer is go and jump in the Arctic Ocean and swim. However, I think about the benefits of cold water. I think that is something everybody should get used to exposing. just this morning, right? Like, you and I had breakfast, had to really quickly go up, shower, come get over here. I still made time to spend 30 seconds to a minute in the ice water of the shower in the hotel.
Yeah.
And I love that feeling of the first time you get into the ice water, you feel
Yeah.
right? You feel that little thing. And I mean, there is really compelling evidence at what this does to brain chemistry. And so that's the other thing that I think you're also experiencing, although
Yeah.
in your swim, it was to a much higher degree than just taking a cold shower or an ice bath. But you
Yeah.
were, I think, probably being flooded with endorphins and neurotransmitters that are very positive.
Absolutely.
And you still do this. I mean, this is still kind of a part of your routine. You're
Oh, for
constantly
sure.
taking an ice bath.
Yeah. And it's probably about exactly what you're saying, like the endorphin kick, but also every time I get in the ice bath, whether I'm somewhat used to it, it's still brutal. But the moment you get out, like you say, you've gone from one extreme to another. So it's an instant sort of kick of happiness. But I find even like, you know, just from inflammation, repair, the general mood, if I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling off and I'm achy and I'm not in the space, I could have a hot shower and like I'm still a bit doughy, but I jump in the cold and completely different. It's a game changer. So
Does Elsa join you? Do your kids
yeah,
join you?
one of my kids often tries to jump in for not that long, but gives it a go. Yeah, and Elsa does it too. We have a sauna and an ice bath set up at home, and it's the best. It's the best rehab.
I couldn't agree more. Single best investment I've ever made was the sauna cold plunge at
Yeah,
home.
definitely.
So let's talk about strength.
So Chris, you obviously spend a lot of time working on your strength training. What type of program do you do?
I mean, I've over the years training for different roles, and for Thor in particular, it was about getting big and mass. I do shoulders one day, arms another, back, chest, legs.
Got it. Okay.
Feel okay?
Obviously, he's in amazing shape. Most of us would look at Chris and give anything to look like that. But there's always room for improvement. There are more than 600 muscles in the human body. And for longevity, you've got to make good use of as many as possible. So when I assessed Chris's muscular power and efficiency, his flexibility and agility, I found he could be working a wider range of those muscles.
That's it. Let's go 2, 1. That's it. Done.
And he could improve his stamina.
I think that was, an awesome episode because I think, and this is a great example of where COVID really benefited the series.
Yeah.
Because, the initial challenge for strength was kind of an interesting challenge, but I think the one you ultimately ended up doing was better.
Yeah.
And my only view on this was like, from a scientific perspective, what can we say about strength and longevity or fitness and longevity and really like kind of grip strength, cardiorespiratory fitness, would be top of the list. And that's why I think that challenge was a perfect challenge because it's grip strength, it's top end cardiorespiratory fitness.
Yeah. Initially it was, I was going to be in a harness and pulling a car across a section of land. And Ross Edgley had done that, I think for 20 hours or something crazy. So he was like, I'll train you to do that. And we were doing it, and I did a good month, like pulling a sled in the backyard.
Yeah.
I had a little Polaris dune buggy thing that I was pulling for a bit. And it just started to like aggravate my back and joints and everything. And then, so we transitioned then to the rope climb. And as you say, it was probably more on point as far as the science around strength and longevity. And then I started training for the rope climb. I'd never climbed a rope before, and Ross had also done a feat like that, and so was training me. He said to me, "Look, you want to be strong, but you don't want to be heavy. The heavier you are, the harder it is going to be to get up that rope." So I had a 3-meter rope in my house, and
That's 10 feet for the Americans.
yeah, 10 feet in my house, and I was going kind of 3/4 the way up and just jumping off and back up and down and doing loops like that. And one day I jumped down, blew my ankle out, and I ruptured all the ligaments and tore ligaments. And
What happened, by the way? Like, was there anything different that day?
I was
literally just
rushing.
landed
The
on
UFC was on, right? My mates were in the next room, and I was in the gym where my house set up. And they go, "I quit starting." I'm like, "I'm just getting in 15 minutes," and I'm up and down. And it must have been like, last one, and I just jumped off, and I had a mat there, and I just rolled my ankle, and it just blew out. And then straight away I looked at it, it was ballooned. And Utopia and all the team from Attia were in Australia ready to shoot. I think it was next week. So called them up and said, this ain't going to happen. And I had a doctor have a look, and I said, yeah, this is not good. And that was the rope, that was the foot I was going to anchor off as I was pulling myself up.
And for folks that have seen Thor, you've got kind of different bodies in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I assume the biggest you were in Thor was that scene when you were in front of Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Is that...
Yeah, I'm that, by the way, I was that size for that afternoon, and kind of, I fluctuate through the film. Obviously, you pick your windows and your days of kind of, you know, where to be your biggest. And this was like, I had been training with Ross prior to that, and quite intensely, and learnt some pretty unique, special things, and how to just kind of blast the body and do the most effective, intense workouts, and when and what to eat and so on. And so I was schooled in that more so than I'd ever been before. So I had an opportunity to get stronger and bigger than I ever was. But the timing of it didn't line up with this event. And so Ross turns up, and I hadn't been using the rope at all because I'd been working, and we started doing it, and I was just heavy, and I was getting like 3-4 pulls up, and I was just like, everything was tightening up and so on. So we had about 2 weeks where I just stopped lifting weights completely. And it's funny, I don't know, you know, every time, if you've ever put on a big amount of muscle, that it doesn't take long for your body to go, okay, this is, we can switch gears now. And so I started doing a lot more rope pulls and sled pulls, and got down to the Blue Mountains where we shot, and there was a...
And what was your weight doing during that period of time? How much weight were you dropping?
I mean, it was only a few weeks, so a little bit, but I was still...
Did you make an effort to reduce your intake as well?
Yeah,
because you were eating
in that
like
2 weeks,
crazy.
Or 2.5 weeks, I stopped lifting weights. I reduced my calories pretty dramatically, and maybe lost a couple of kilos. I don't know, it would have been like 209 or something, but still heavier than I should have been for it. Yeah, and we get to the Blue Mountains, and it's the most beautiful setting, and there's the cable cart across 2 mountains. It's 1,000 foot off the ground, and we go out onto this cart, and they throw the rope out, and it's 100 feet, the rope, which is 3-4 times longer than anything I've climbed in my training or anything. So again, this became less about, well, you've trained for this, and more about just, again, grit and will, and just get up there. And I just remember Ross kind of at the top of the cart going, make it a fist fight, make it a fight. Come on, big man.
Stand by for the doors opening. Got the rope going out.
Oh, I don't even want to look out there. Whoa, that all hits me. And all the little voices of doubt that I've been pushing aside in my mind start sort of getting louder and louder.
I'm looking down and I'm thinking, that is not something I fancy doing. But I cannot let Chris see any moment of doubt in my mind at all.
Oh.
No. Switch on.
Yeah, I'm good. Here we go. Ready? So I'm getting winched down, and it feels a lot longer than 100 feet. I don't want to look back up, because I'm like, this is so much further than I've ever climbed.
How long did it actually take, start to finish?
It's probably, I don't know, probably a couple of minutes, which is a long time to be. There's no, you know, there's a harness that will catch me if I fall, but none of it is helping me up the rope. And I was surprised the quad burn was one of the most gnarly things.
More than your hands, more than your forearms?
Both, biceps and forearms. I mean, when I got off, I had like claws. I couldn't extend my fingers; they were locked. But my quads, and especially my right leg, kind of doing the push and the anchor.
So how do you feel physically now, from a strength perspective, in terms of like how this has kind of morphed your training a little bit.
I feel it's more specific, my
Yeah.
training now. You know, I used to just sort of go in, and I still do to an extent, like, and just start throwing weights around and go, you know, I go biceps, you know, I go back and I go chest and shoulders, and just as heavy as I could, as much as I could. And when I was a bit younger, I could get away with doing that. And then now it's like, oh, geez, I'm just not warming that up properly, or, you know, you're kind of hitting everything too many times. And so just being smart about the training. And that came from working with Ross and my trainer, Luke Zocchi, as well. And we did, you just much more targeted approach. He has really interesting, intense ways to work out, though. Everything is about sort of explosive energy, like light up your your parasympathetic nervous system and just switch on.
Sympathetic, probably. Yeah.
Sympathy. Yeah. So what do you got? Sympathetic. Yeah. And fire up and just explosive up, and then slow negatives. That made dramatic differences. I got far more gains than I had previously training like that.
Now, you actually, I don't think I've told you this, by the way, but, you know, in the process of kind of going through a lot of your genetic stuff, which we're doing now, right? Like, so kind of, we'll talk about this in a second, but kind of doing this, you know, we actually have found that you have a very favorable gene around muscle fibers. So, yeah. So I think that, you know, we'll talk a second about kind of like a gene you have that we wish we could erase, but on the flip side, you got a pretty favorable gene around fast twitch muscle fibers.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, you sort of have a genetic predisposition to be muscular and to be strong and to be explosive.
I've always, even I was lean when I was younger, but as soon as I started, even when I was playing footy, you know, I was 17, doing more push-ups, whatever, I would grow. And it's, you know, I've always sort of worked my ass off in that space, but I do feel I've had some benefits there.
It's a great variant of a gene to have as you age, because one of the hallmarks of aging is actually atrophy, shrinkage of these fast twitch muscle fibers.
So shrinkage in Norway, definitely. Different type.
Different type, but yes. So as we get older, these slow twitch muscle fibers are shrinking in everybody, and that's why people are losing strength and power and explosiveness most rapidly as they age, much more than they're losing endurance. Slow fiber, right? So, you know, one of the things we always talk about with our patients is, hey, we need you lifting weights all the time.
Yeah.
You start early and you never stop lifting weights, and the heaviest you can lift is the better, because it's only through lifting heavy weights that you can really get those fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers firing. So the fact that you kind of have a genetic predisposition to have more of them is a good thing.
Good.
Which then brings us to kind of like some of the other stuff we talked about. So, you know, one of my earliest memories of this whole experience was in December of 2019. We took advantage of the fact that you were in LA to get some blood work done. And, you know, Darren said, look, here's the deal. You and Chris are going to sit down in January in Australia to kick off the first bit of shooting. And I want you to walk Chris through his blood work just as you would do with a patient the very first time. And I said, okay, great. So I get the blood test back about 2 weeks before I'm supposed to go out to Australia, and I see something in it that I say, Darren, I can't walk him through this for the first time on camera. That's not fair to him. And I know you guys would like, I know that's what sort of the drama is, but this is a bit too much. But I can't tell you, Darren, what it is. So without telling you, you need to trust me that this can't be done on camera for the first time. This one thing. You can do the whole lab, but this one thing. So I asked him to sort of trust me, and he did, and then we connected. So
he called me first.
Yeah.
Kind of in a panic, and was like, "You've got to call Peter Attia. Something's come up, but I don't know what it is." And I was like, "Oh God, this is how long have I got left? What's happening?" And so I was kind of rattled before we even got on the phone.
We did sort of the $1 million workup on you. We've got every blood test one can get, and I've looked at every gene in your body 6 ways to Sunday. And overall, your labs look fantastic. And I think looking at you from the outside, it's clear how much you take care of yourself. But we did find a couple of things that are a cause for concern.
Right.
Some of the genetic testing that we did looked at a gene for a protein called ApoE. You have a very rare combination which is you have 2 copies of ApoE4, a set from your mom and a set from your dad.
And what does that mean exactly?
That means you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
How much higher?
Probably somewhere between 8 and 10 times higher than that of someone in the general population.
Yeah, right, okay.
You know, I don't know, you're constantly thinking you're going to live forever, especially as a young individual, and then to all of a sudden be told, oh, this may be the thing that might take you out, was like, whoa, kind of floored me for a minute.
You know, it's hard to imagine, but it's my belief that if we take every step possible, we can reduce your risk to that of anyone else.
Sure.
In fact, I don't think you'll believe me when I say this, but I think you will in time. You having this gene is probably a blessing.
Because the motivation that'll get me to...
Yeah, this is going to motivate you to take steps today that most people your age would never think about until they're in their 50s or 60s.
Sure.
I hadn't had too many patients that had this combination of ApoE4-4. It's not a very common genotype. It's only about 1% of the population. So I probably only at that time had maybe 3 patients that had it. And truthfully, 2 of the 3 of them kind of suspected it before the blood test based on their family history.
Yeah.
In one case, about a 40-year-old woman, total shocker. And so I remember just sort of trying to say, look, this is a gene that really increases risk of Alzheimer's disease, but it's not a deterministic gene. And that's, I think, just, look, it's something someone like me can take for granted because I'm sort of in this space, I understand that, but I think that's a hard concept to explain to somebody who doesn't eat, sleep, and breathe genetics, which is, you have this gene and it doesn't guarantee this thing is going to happen. And there are some genes that do, by the way. There are certain genes that if you have the gene for Huntington's disease, you're going to get Huntington's disease. This isn't that kind of gene, but it's increasing your odds. And that's the bad news. And then the good news is the earlier you know this, the more you can do to mitigate risk. So that was my message. But what did you hear? I mean, how much do you think back to that day?
Again, I knew nothing about the science or the sort of the markers and so on outside of that one conversation. And so I hung up and I was trying to explain it to my wife, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure what he just said, but I think I'm more vulnerable to Alzheimer's. And then we had another conversation, and I wish we'd had more conversations immediately after, because I did spend sort of a week going, what does this mean? What's going to happen? And how long have I got? And I'm trying to talk to my parents about it, and they didn't know much about it either. My grandfather has Alzheimer's, and it's been very tragic to watch. And so they were aware of it, but didn't know in any great detail about the gene combination that we were talking about. But as you say, it was just a good sort of kick in the arse and a reminder to, do what I can, whatever's within my control and within my power, to give myself the best fighting chance. And whatever work I'm doing for brain health benefits the rest of my body and the rest of my life anyway. So, yeah, we turned it into a positive.
One of the things that was sort of interesting about filming this is we obviously came out, we filmed it, and we did everything in duplicate for those episodes, right? We did it where we did everything. We talked about all this stuff. We went through all this stuff. And then, of course, it was also done, which is, hey, there's a really good chance that we're not going to want to talk about this particular aspect of Chris's health publicly. So let's redo that whole thing, but without that.
Yeah.
And I think for about 2 years, we didn't know which version of this was going to happen. Obviously, the decision was 100% yours. When and why did you decide that you wanted to be public with something so personal?
Once I understood more about it, but also, the same reason it's motivated me to make positive changes, I thought, well, that's a great opportunity for anyone else out there who may be in the same situation, to either go and get checked or to understand more about brain health and see what they have within their power to make that change. So I thought, it's I don't know, it's a missed opportunity to motivate others to do the same if I don't talk about it. And then they cut together two versions of the episode, and the other one was just kind of fell flat and didn't, So this had, and there was no, it didn't over dramatize it or exploit or anything. I think what they did a great job at was it just became relatable. It became, and this is what most of the series was like. Look, he's a human being like you or I, and the sort of superhero costume aside, this is an individual who has many of the same challenges and is up against the same things that all of us are. So
Even though you have 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, which is a very rare combination, 20 to 25% of the population has at least 1 copy of the E4 gene. And even though that doesn't increase their risk as much as the increase that you experience, it still does. In fact, even though it's only 20 to 25% of the population that has that gene, that group of people makes up about 2/3 of cases of Alzheimer's disease. So I do think, you know, I applaud you for doing it, and I'm really glad you did decide to do this, because I've always said I really wish every single person would know their ApoE genotype early in life.
yeah,
And there's a lot of resistance in the medical community to this, truthfully. There are a lot of physicians who would say, look, no one should know that. There's nothing that can be done about it. Why would you burden somebody with that knowledge?
yeah,
And people like me and Richard Isaacson, Kellyanne Neotis, people I work with, I mean, we fundamentally disagree with that, Chris. We think that is complete nonsense. And we think that this is absolutely a condition through which you have an enormous lever arm to mitigate risk. And if that's true, which I wholeheartedly believe it is, then not knowing that information early
for sure.
is criminal.
Yeah. Well, and also, as we're saying, that whatever I do in regards to, protection and arming myself with, the sort of tools to have the best chance, it benefits everything else anyway. We talked about,
exactly.
Reducing stress levels, more mindfulness practices, there's certain training I do, nutrition, my sleep habits. All those things made a dramatic difference in every other part of my life too. So,
one of the things we'll talk about is sauna, right?
But Peter's convinced that regular saunas can boost my long-term health.
Now that we just got in here, Chris, let's take your pulse.
all right.
Yeah, you're about 64 beats per minute, but we've got this temperature cranked up to about 195 degree Fahrenheit. So let's see where you are in a couple of minutes.
I guess I gotta get used to this heat.
Yeah, we're uncomfortable right now because we're hot, and in response to that, our body is trying to cool us off.
Yeah.
And so it's pumping harder so that your heart can quickly get the blood to the outside of your body. And just as exercise is known to help with cardiovascular disease, I think sauna has a number of those benefits as well. How much of a fan were you of sauna before we shot that series in Norway, and then really kind of got into the science of why it's likely? It hasn't been proven yet to the same extent that some things have, because so much of the data is observational, but it's so overwhelmingly positive in the same direction with every single study.
Yeah.
And I think we're quite confident it is. I know you've always enjoyed it, but has that taken on kind of a more urgent role?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and definitely during having shot the show, it's made or it's become a bigger part of my daily routine, often after a workout. And again, I don't know what the science says, but I know I feel great after doing it. Same with an ice bath. And so if sort of mood elevation was the only thing, then I'm all about it.
Well, I would say, even if the emphasis and the benefit of the heat shock proteins is less than what we think, I agree with you. I think just the psychological benefit and the sleep benefit. I mean, but the difference in my sleep between when I sauna and when I don't is so noticeable that, and we, then again, are we going to question the benefits of sleep? I don't think so.
I mean, there is no doubt, even if I've been training a lot and I wake up achy in particular, I've had issues with my back over the years. If I wake up and I get in the sauna in the morning and I do an ice bath or either or, like I feel 50, 60% better. And the sort of, that's the thing, you lie in bed all night and you're in, that position, and everything starts to kind of, I don't know, lies dormant and becomes, I don't know, there's no fluidity there. You know what I mean? You wake up and you're stiff and sore, and then you get into one of those spaces, the hot, the cold, or the hot, and instantly I feel like everything's just kind of lit up and awakened. So
when we think about kind of the last episode, which is the one that we saw in the premiere, we were talking about this over breakfast today, but that episode, maybe more than any other, really reaped the benefit of COVID because it had so much more time to flesh out. You know, when I think about what the first version of the final episode was supposed to look like, if this was kind of blasted through in 2020, I won't restate what that episode was supposed to be, but it was kind of gimmicky.
Yeah.
It didn't work. I didn't think it would have worked. And then what it became is unbelievable.
Yeah.
What was in your mind? How was the evolution of that episode? Because did you have much of a hand in the creative side of that, or were you kind of just a passenger?
No, I was a passenger, and I was kept in the dark intentionally. Darren didn't want me to know much about it. It was an immersive theatre experience, and I'm glad I didn't know, because I feel like I would have had preconceived sort of ideas and then expectations, and I wouldn't, couldn't have helped acting a certain way or reacting a certain way based on that. So to go into it blind and just open and ready for whatever they were going to throw at me or throw me into was exciting and different to the other episodes. Everything else was about being prepped in some way and learning and understanding some of the science prior to shooting, whereas this, it was about, all I knew was it was about the acceptance of death.
All I've been told is that I'm about to jump forward 50 years into the future and spend the next 3 days living the life of an octogenarian. The architect of this strange challenge is Dr. B.J. Miller, a world-renowned palliative care physician. His work centers on unlocking the transformative power of accepting aging and death.
Dying offers us something, but we can change how we see it, what we do with it, how we play with it.
Chris is about to take part in a truly unique experiment.
Ready, my old man?
I don't know. I mean, ask me in 3 days' time, maybe.
What did that suit feel like?
Just uncomfortable and incredibly restrictive. And I talk about this in the episode, the way people then spoke to me, because they knew I couldn't hear properly, and there was sort of this condescending, sort of patronizing tone of, how will you hear, people, and some of the time talk to elderly, and it made me immediately go, oh my God, I hope I don't do that. But incredibly isolating too. Your vision's diminished, and as I said, you can't hear, restricted. So everything has been pulled away. All the sort of your abilities that were there the hour before I put it on, and also not having 50 years to transition into that. It was like, again,
overnight,
one extreme to the other, in the opposite direction to what we were talking about before.
There's so many things about that episode that are beyond beautiful. One of them, to me, it's just a very subtle thing, is that all of the residents of that place were not actors.
Yeah.
And what was it like kind of interacting with them? Because, you watch the episode, it's like a, slightly over an hour-long episode, but I assume shooting it was days, at minimum 3 days.
3
right?
days, yeah.
So you have a lot of time on that set. I reckon some of those folks didn't necessarily know who you were prior to that episode.
I don't think any of them did, to be honest, yeah.
Which must have been a great relief, wasn't it?
It was really nice. It was unique and different on so many levels, that episode. But to be in a retirement village with elderly folks who, were there for the fun of the episode, but were just genuine and truthful and honest, and didn't hold back with anything they were thinking, and there was sort of the no filter approach to things was great. It was refreshing. I think being in a sort of industry where a lot of people do know who you are, and a lot of the time you're sort of supported in what you're doing, and everything's kind of tried to, be made or be accommodating as possible. That was like, no, you're one of us now. And it was fantastic. Sort of brought me straight back to earth if I'd drifted previously.
Well, having known you for many years now, you're pretty down to earth. But I still think that must have been even another level, because you're so far out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
This wasn't there's no superhero component to this.
No. I was a lot more nervous about that episode than anything else because it wasn't something I could fight or muscle through or just put my head down, grit my teeth and go for it. I had to be completely open and vulnerable and accessible and confront things that I had never really thought about that much and interact with people who were at the end of their days, or who had dealt with death in very extreme ways or come close to death. And so to go from sort of one environment of physical sort of challenge and feats and then go into this emotional state was a real shock and an adjustment. And I'm so proud of what the episode is and became because it's unlike anything I've certainly ever done, but unlike anything I think that I've seen before in the doc space.
Several moments that really stood out to me. I'm guessing you didn't know BJ Miller's story before that episode.
No, I didn't. No.
And because it came across as really genuine when you're hearing it for the first time on camera. It looked to me as though that was the first time you were hearing. So
it was, yeah.
Do you recall what that felt like? Because it seemed like you got quite emotional. And I'm curious as to what was more emotional. Was it the tragedy of his story, or was it more how moved you were by his resilience and how he overcame it to do what he's doing?
Combination of things. He's one of the most unique individuals I've ever met. This is something saintly and otherworldly about him.
Yeah.
He is just such a beautiful individual. Certainly his story shook me, and also the strength now that in which he reflects upon it and his attitude toward what happened to him was so inspiring. It made me, I was really exhausted coming into that episode. I was at the end of it felt like a 5-year run of different films and work, and we were shooting this series throughout. And I think I was more vulnerable than I'd been in a long time, just out of exhaustion, but also out of the questions that were starting to circulate through my head. And a lot of them were to do with, this point in my life and am I proud of what I've done? Am I, what's next? And all I kept thinking was, I have been sprinting through life and the moments and opportunities, and I'm grateful for them, but I've been very quickly going to the next one, to the next one, next one. And I was in a bit of a state of what's next and what's the point and who am I and all of this kind of questions that I hadn't sort of been able to analyze, but were there in the back of my head. And my mum had said something to me a few days before that she'd had this experience where she came pretty close to what she thought was going to be her death in a very instant sort of moment. And she's fine now, but said, I wasn't at all afraid to go because I realized I'm so thankful for my life and I'm so happy that everything I've had and all the experiences I have. And I thought, well, what a beautiful feeling. And then in that moment, I think I was talking to BJ about it and I got really emotional because I realized that I'm not ready yet. Yeah. I have all these beautiful things around me and family and friends, but I can't go yet. This is not my time. And it was strange because we're manipulating everything in that space to make me feel like I'm going to die. I'm asked to think about my death, how I would want it to be and so on. But I had this sort of sense of urgency of just, I'm not ready. And it made me think about my kids and how they're growing up and things are changing so dramatically. And like, I want to sit. I want to soak it in. I don't want to be in a sprint anymore. I want to be more present. I want to be right here and appreciate everything that's in front of me. And again, I've tried to articulate that a few times, and I feel I don't know if I've hit the nail on the head as exactly why it's something in me sort of felt so fragile at that point. But yeah, that whole experience sort of shook me to my core and made me want to slow down and just race home to my family and my kids and not jump on another plane and travel and work and do anything else. You know, it was we in the best way.
I think the time when you were sitting on the bench next to Natalie was sort of equally profound.
Yeah.
At least it appeared that way as an observer. I assume it's the same. You weren't aware of Natalie's story, and you're probably sitting there thinking, why are they having me sit and talk to a 27-year-old,
Yeah.
very normal, healthy appearing woman?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Again, just such again, that what she said particularly was there's an urgency from her to shake people and say, wake up, it doesn't last forever. You know, it could, the end could come at any moment. So make the most of it and love and laugh and live with a sense of gratitude and joy. And incredibly inspiring and heartbreaking hearing what she's been facing at such a young age too. And I'm really thankful that I had those conversations and I was forced to think this way and had this realization now, not when I'm 80. You know, I'm glad I'm not sitting on my deathbed going, damn, I should have done this. I could have done this. If only I'd done that. So I don't know. I feel like this is sort of an awakening or a sort of shake up or whatever you want to call it, came at the perfect time for me.
You and I talked about this like last month, I think, but you haven't had more than 2 months off in about 10 years, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've had, you know, during COVID, but even then I was still working or prepping things and so on.
How do you reconcile the fact that you work so hard and you've been so successful, and with that success has come so many wonderful things, right? You've got wealth, you've got fame, you've got a platform, right? We're sitting here talking about more people are going to know what the ApoE4 gene is and why they need to be tested and what they can do about it because of this episode, because of this series, than anything else that would have ever come out of the scientific literature ever. And all of that is attributed to the fact that you have a platform to do this. So there's all of these amazing things, both to you personally and to society at large, that come from this. But at the same time, that's not sustainable. You once told me a story about something your daughter said when you kind of half jokingly suggested to her you might retire. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah. I was talking to her, and as I've done, I feel like I've been doing for a long time to my kids. I'm like, you know, every time I've left to go on another trip or go back to work, I'm like, but it's not long, you know, and just soon I'm going to take some downtime. And I think, you know, my daughter sort of rolls her eyes at times these days and says, yeah, sure. And I said, and then this time I said, look, you know, when I've done this tour, I'm having a big chunk of time at home. And she goes, oh, great, awesome, it'll be fun. And I said, yeah, and maybe I'll just retire. Maybe this is it. Maybe I'll stay home with you forever now. And she's like, no, Dad, you can't. And I was like, why? And she goes, because kids love seeing you play Thor. And it was this beautiful kind of moment of like, oh yeah, maybe it does. There is a purpose to it. You know, I think for me, I've been chasing my career and I've been doing it for a number of reasons, but you know, it's been my journey, and there's a sense of sort of guilt that comes with that, of sort of chasing down my dreams all the time. And when you have kids, it's not about your dreams anymore, it's about theirs, and I have a family to take care of. And I was really sort of questioning kind of what I've contributed or done, and hearing her say that was like a, you know, a beautiful little moment. And so I don't want to retire, and you know, for a number of reasons, but I certainly want to replenish and, you know, fill up my cup again. I feel like it's just been sort of flat stick for so long now, and I've loved it, and I'm very thankful for it. But I need to have, you know, a chunk of time at home now and sort of, yeah, get re-inspired, I guess.
How is your sleep now compared to 3 years ago? Because I remember when we
Yeah.
met, you struggled. You had a very restless mind.
Yeah.
You would wake up a lot in the middle of the night and you'd have a thought and you'd fixate on it. And sometimes it was a very rational thought, like, you know, I'm worried about the success of this film. I'm worried about my relationship with my wife. I'm worried about, like, these were all very normal things to be concerned with, but they would wake you up,
Yeah.
right? And you wouldn't be able to go back to sleep. And then sometimes they were things that maybe seemed less rational. Which, by the way, I'm not being critical of you, because every one of us has
they were
those
mostly
very
irrational.
irrational thoughts.
They're mostly irrational. Stress. It definitely affects my sleep. And this is just going back a few years, you know. This is not such a big issue these days, but actually, it's not true. It is. Yeah, like I'll go to sleep fine, and then at 2:30, there's a shot of adrenaline, and my brain will just start going through a checklist of things. Be like, does that bother me? Does that bother? Oh, that one, yeah, good. Let's think about that. Let's tear that apart.
Are you getting nervous a bit now?
A little wave of nausea. Sometimes I don't even know why, and I wish I could deal with that stress better. Just got a whole lot realer, didn't it? Not just because it sucks, okay, but also it could be killing me.
How has that changed? And has this series given you a different perspective on anything that has given you more peace?
Yeah, definitely. I think generally I'm sleeping better than I was back then. I think just running in a state of fight or flight constantly, and but that was required for me to become an actor. For me to leave Australia with not a whole lot of money in the bank and live on people's couches and audition and go through that sort of grind and be told no a million times and still obsessively be pushing forward requires a huge amount of compulsive, obsessive sort of self-motivated drive. And then the problem is you then start to achieve those things, and I'm no longer in the same sort of fight that I was, but I'm still acting like I am. My internal sort of environment is still thinking it's, running away from the dinosaurs or whatever, it goes back to to our sort of ancestral, makeup. And so, the more comfortable I get, and the more I sort of rationally talk myself through, hey, it's all okay now, like you can afford to do this and this and this, and you don't have to you worry so much about it not working out. Some of that dissipates, but it's there all the time, and I'd be lying if I said that I had a complete handle on it. But again, I don't want to kind of dismiss it too much, because it's what got me here, and it's a tool that I will still need to use at certain times. It's just monitoring that, and I don't know. I hear a lot of people talk about that, though. People in the sort of friends of mine, sports players and so on, with that, what's required to get them to that place. It's a blessing and a curse, and it's a hard thing to switch off. Sorry, once you've opened the gates.
Yeah, I think that's a very common thread for people who have achieved great success. And when you think about your motivation, right? When you think about the love you have for your craft, is there a way to use excitement more than fear? Like how, because I think back to, your beginning, right? As you talked about, you've spoken a lot about, and I think you even did in some of the episodes, you spoke about how, one day you found out your father, like wasn't going to be paying off the mortgage anytime soon. Like you sort of had this realization of the fact that your parents have done so much for you and your brothers with the means that they had, but you wanted more for them. And so part of your fuel for success was like, I want to take care of my family as well. Not just the kids that I'm going to have, which you didn't yet have, but like these people who you love so much. And there's a bit of fear in that, right? There's a bit of like do or die.
Yep.
But at the same time, there's also a real passion you have for what you do.
Yeah.
in other words, you're an artist, right? And so artists enjoy making art. Is it about shifting the balance of what's the fire? Like where's the fire coming from? Is the fire coming from a place of fear? Is the fire coming from a place of love? I mean, do those go back and forth for you from time to time in different seasons?
Yeah. I used to get I had excuse me, very intense like performance anxiety when I was first acting, and it was debilitating. I would go to auditions and I'd want to throw up and I'd be shaking. And then even when I got jobs, and I don't know how I was getting jobs based on how nervous I was in those auditions, but I was then be on a set and it was like I couldn't think or see, and I felt like I was going to pass out. And I was fighting that for years. And you talk about fear or excitement, and I remember reading something that took a series of tests with athletes, performers, musicians, actors, whatever, anyone in a sort of adrenaline-fueled sort of space. And they said, okay, before the event, are you nervous or excited? And some of them said they were scared out of their minds. Some of them said they were pumped. The interesting thing was they all had the same physical response.
Yeah.
Elevated heart, pulse, etc., clammy hands, short of breath. The only difference was how they labeled that feeling. And so for me, that was a real light bulb moment. And I thought, oh, okay. So when this feeling comes up and I'm about to walk onto a set, and you know, I programmed myself to say, oh, this is bad.
That's fear.
This is fear. This is a negative.
Yeah.
I then went, nope, this is a positive. My spidey senses are up now. I'm going to be able to think faster, react quicker. I'm going to see clearer. I'm going to, you know, my vision will be sharp. And it was, and that was all it was a decision then to see it differently. Then sort of, you know, as time goes on, I think the fear does have its place though. You know, I think you sort of, what I've heard people talking, you know, that the fear pushes you, your purpose pulls you, and both of them need to have equal sort of relevance in the conversation. And it's a bloody good motivator too. You know, half of these challenges, my fear of looking ridiculous if I didn't complete this task, or the fact that the episode wouldn't have worked, you know, that kept me going. But also the sort of purpose of why I was doing it kept me going. So I think they both deserve conversation. Just it's about balance. And if either of them get too much attention, then, you know, you have too much of, my purpose and my thing. There can be a lack of humility there. You know, the fear I feel has allowed me to have more of a self-deprecating sort of sense of humor about myself and the world and the work, and hopefully kept me humble too.
What was the first role you had where you allowed yourself to think, I'm going to make it?
Well, it's interesting. The first Thor film, I thought, great, I'm in the game, certainly. But
which year was the first Thor film?
Was it 2010? I think.
Yeah.
I thought, this is good. I'm kind of in the mix, but I didn't know if the film was going to work. I didn't know if we were going to do an Avengers film.
And you weren't the first choice, or were you? Wasn't there something funny in the audition there?
Yeah, there was. I auditioned initially and didn't get a call back. I got some pretty bad feedback, and
what was the feedback?
Just no good. just
really direct feedback.
Really like minimal feedback, which is like we're not even going to give you any sort of, you know, constructive criticism or anything. It was just kind of minimal and nothing. And I was shooting a film in Vancouver, and my little brother calls me up and said, "Oh, they're going to fly me out from Australia to LA for this film Thor." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I sent an audition on a tape and I'm going over." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome, man. Congrats. Wow. What, you know?" And then the trades, I think Variety or Deadline, come out and had like the 6 final guys for Thor, and Liam was one of those people. And it was with Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard it was Cabin in the Woods. And they both said, "What the hell's going on here? Is this your brother?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why are you in the mix? You should be Thor." And I was like, "I don't know. I didn't get a call back," so on. None of them ended up getting it, and they reopened the casting. And I got a chance to do an audition, and I sent in a tape, and I was called back in to meet with Ken Branagh and do the audition. And I just had a very different attitude about it. I didn't put anyone on a pedestal like I did the first time. I had there was a little
chip on your shoulder
off. Yeah, that my brother had gotten there and I hadn't, and it was a good motivation. And and it's about perspective, and then I was able to walk into that room and give the best version of whatever I had to offer, as opposed to people pleasing and going in, going, is this what you want, or is it this or this way? And then there's nothing. There's a lack of strength there. I think they needed the character to be assertive, and so I had a lot more sort of the presence in that space, and I did the first time round, and then got the part.
How long does an audition take?
Well, I mean, usually you have a few days to learn it. Sometimes they call you at lunchtime and they say, come in this afternoon and read. And but the
And when
audition
you're
itself
actually
is,
there in front of them,
it can be, again, depending on how well or bad it goes,
Yeah.
it could be 5 minutes, it could be 2 minutes, it could be an hour. And I've had both. I've had like people answer the phone midway through my audition when I first got to town. They'd just be like, yeah, cool. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, am I supposed to be still going? And just like, yep, that's great. Thank you very much. We'll call you. And you're like, oh my God, it's good, brutal. You get enough of them and you either become numb to it or it destroys you.
how'd you hear about Rush?
So Ron Howard was making the film. I didn't know anything about Formula One.
It's because you didn't know me.
I didn't know you. And my agent had called me and said, oh, you should do an audition. And Ron said, oh, look, I've seen Thor. He's great, but he's not right for the character. He won't fit in the Formula One car. And I said, well, I'm not that size. And he said, yeah, it's okay. And I said, I'm doing an audition. And I watched an interview with James Hunt, and my hair was kind of long enough that I could kind of style it exactly how his was. And I had, been practicing the accent and did an audition, and he saw it and went, okay, cool. Maybe
Had he already picked Daniel for Nikki?
I think he had, yeah.
I mean, you know my feelings on that film.
Yeah.
Like, if you were getting $1 for every time that film got watched
by
me,
yeah.
You'd be even more wealthy.
Yeah, mate, I'm so thankful.
It's such a good movie.
You would know it better than I do at this point. I haven't seen it since the premiere.
Are you kidding me?
It's hard to watch yourself, It's
so you don't take your kids to Thor, or they don't watch it around the house? I know you take them to the premiere, but like,
yeah, no, I take them to occasionally. Well, that was the first premiere I took them to, but I'll watch it once, or twice, or if I'm producing it, then I have to, stick through it a bit more. But it's and it should be uncomfortable. I think.
Yeah,
there's something narcissistic about enjoying it too much.
So if we're sitting here in 5 years, and your life is better than it is today, especially in accordance with the final episode of Limitless, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning you're running less. The balance between purpose and fear is more in favor of purpose than fear. You feel more connected to your kids, your family. What has to be true? What are you doing?
Look, I don't think it's, this is another thing that came up in the episode. I just want to sort of clarify. I don't feel like I've been doing anything wrong as much as I've just been in the storm of it, and I have a beautiful relationship with my kids and my wife and my family. And I'll be there with them, but my brain is pulled in a million other places. And so for things to be even better, would just be about,
like, is it just about a state of mind, or does it mean...
It's both, because in the episode, I was talking about this, and I said, I was being asked to imagine what my death would look like, and if this was my final moment, who would I have around me, where would I be? And I realized it's in the living room with my family and friends, and that's every other weekend. I have it. So it was as much a moment of, it's already right here in front of you, change your attitude. And also, in addition to that, was, okay, I want to do this even more now. And I have an opportunity to do that because I'm not in the fight or the sprint anymore. And so it would be to be more curated with my choices and have more time pre and post the film to prepare and decompress, as opposed to just piling one after the other.
Does that mean more directing? Shifting the balance a little bit?
I think it's who the directors are. I think working with people that are at the top of their game, and I've been so lucky to work with some wonderful people. But to continue, I just work with George Miller, And to continue to work with individuals like that, where I'm learning from them, it's a collaboration, but they're at the helm, they're steering the ship. I don't have to feel like I got to police anyone else there, you know. It is the dream. And then you're inspired by those people, and you're doing it for the right reasons. It's from an artistic space and an expression, as opposed to, you know, a financial one. Oh, it's a good payday. Script sucks, but I get paid well, you know, which I've done a few times, you know. And so, yeah, to be more curated in my choices and, you know, have more stillness and more calm either side of it.
Chris, I think I think about the last 3 years, and I think about the when we started this thing in January. For me, one of the most unexpected joys of this, because I really only did this because of Darren. You know, Darren and I were and remain such good friends, and the chance to do something fun like this with him was the motivation. But I think, you know, a very pleasant surprise for me has been meeting you and meeting all the people around you, and it gives me great comfort as now someone who's become a close friend of yours, to know that you are surrounded by these amazing people, you know, like Ben and Aaron and Zach and your family and your parents and your brothers. I mean, you are rich, Chris. You are rich in people, and I suspect that's actually probably your greatest asset. So it's been a real privilege to be a part of that.
Oh, well, it's been wonderful getting to know you too, mate. It's been the biggest joy is the people I've met through this experience, and the knowledge, one thing, but the friendship's the most important. And so thank you, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thanks for
Been
sitting
great.
down with me.
Yeah.